This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hi, my name is Madison.
I'm Hannah.
And you're listening to Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
So today, what's new today? What's new today?
In the true crime world?
Yeah, do you know anything? We didn't look it up.
So somebody reached out and sent a message about a girl who had gone missing and her body was found.
Oh.
Her name's Kylie. Do you know about her?
Yes, she was blonde.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she just left. And I think her car was just found at the bottom of a lake.
Yes.
So they don't really know what happened to her.
Well, okay, so the interesting, I guess, play on that, or like the interesting aspect of that is like as soon as she went missing, I think like everyone kind of freaked out and like I don't know if they were like blaming people. Let me see what was her name. But it turns out it looks like it was just a horrible accident,
which is crazy. How does your car end up at the bottom of a lake?
Yeah, well, who knows? Like maybe the shady aspect of it was like somebody like ran into her or something, and then like ran or something. Yes, it was after a party. 16 years old. Yeah, it was after a party, you said?
Yeah.
Kylie Rodney. But I think the kind of lesson people are starting to learn from this is like you need to wait until the facts come out before you start blaming people.
That's for sure, yeah.
Especially because it was after she had attended a party. So it's very... I mean, it's possible that she was, under the influence or something and was driving or something like that. I don't know. I have not looked into it at all. But there's been a lot of instances, like we've seen so many stories, like for example, Chris Watts or whatever, where like you see him and it's like very obvious, like he's being really shady and stuff. But a lot of people react poorly to things, or they, seem like maybe they're guilty of something when they're really not, and like a lot of the times the media just like jumps to like conclusions, and then you have a mob on your hands of an online mob of people who think one way. It's
hard because on the one hand, if she was really kidnapped, you want to get on it right away, and
I don't know, in this situation, like was there like,
I think they looked into some ex-boyfriends or something like that. But I mean, maybe we'll never know what happened, but...
Yeah, well, I'm sure they'll probably, sort something out. There's a lot of things they can do forensically to sort out, like, what happened to the car or whatever. Right. So, I mean, everybody hang tight and we'll see.
Yep.
But there's another thing that I wanted to talk about, too, which is my announcement.
Oh, yeah. Tell us your announcement.
Is one of my children crying?
I don't think I hear anything.
No? Oh, I hear phantom cries all the time.
Yeah, that's me too with the dogs.
It's really annoying.
If I have a whiny dog staying with me, I just hear it all the time. I'm like, wait. Basically, the moral of this is that children and dogs are the exact same. Essentially.
Yeah.
Pretty
much. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but...
Pretty much.
You let us know who agrees with that.
All my dog moms.
But yeah, I have an announcement of
Let's
a new project I've been working on that I will be launching into the world on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
It is a newsletter.
Yep.
It is a true crime newsletter that's basically just like a curated bunch of true crime content.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously be promoting our podcast on the newsletter. So every newsletter will have the current podcast that we put out, links to that and everything. And then I'm starting a very bare bones, just very simple. And I kind of would like to see where it goes. I'd really love to get any feedback from other people to see what you'd like to see. I would love to get suggestions of whatever anybody else is watching or listening to or reading or whatever. So I'm going to start putting out like a couple suggestions on like what's on Netflix or what's on Crave or books that we've read or podcasts or channels or whatever. And then maybe a little bit of news, some survey questions. I'd like to kind of like grow it and see what people are interested in and kind of go from there.
And how can people sign up for it?
They can go to, it is called Grim Weekly, and you can go to grimweekly.com and sign up. It's GRIM weekly.com, and you can sign up, and it's free. And if you hate it, you can unsubscribe. Please don't, but you can. And the first one will come out on Friday, which is, what is the date on Friday? Let me see. Is the 2nd of August. That will be the first issue. September 2nd. So I'm really excited about it, and I hope you sign up for it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's very good.
Yeah, it'll be
easy to read.
Yeah, the first one will be pretty minimal, but I'd like to like kind of grow on it, or have it grow or whatever. And yeah,
cool. We're excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been working on it for a while.
So check it out.
And also exciting, today is our 50th episode.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
50 is a big number. I actually can't believe we made it to 50. So I'm pretty stoked to be here.
That's pretty cool. Almost a year.
Yeah, almost a year. 52 should be a year, but I don't know if that...
Somehow it's not.
I'm not doing... I don't like doing math on camera.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but we'll just go with it.
Somehow we always end up doing that. Anyway, so today is the 3rd installment of our Unabomber series.
Yeah.
I'll give
conclusion.
A wee recap just of the...
Thanks.
I'll give a generous recap of the second one, because the third one, I can't go through all of it.
There's a lot.
Yeah. But in the second one, I'll just say we went through all the specific bombs. There were 16 of them. 3 of them killed people, and that was like kind of at the end. I think it was like 1, then a couple more that didn't kill people, and then
but a lot of people injured.
Yeah, a lot of injuries. And we saw the FBI lead a task force that was like the search was the biggest search in American history for a killer. And they ended up finding out who it was. It was Ted Kaczynski, and they found out because his brother's wife recognized him within the writings of that they had been releasing in the newspaper. And then Ted ended up sending his entire manifesto, which is what we're going to get to today, to
super excited for that.
A bunch of newspapers, and the Washington Post was the one who put it out. And then she made David read it, and he was like, oh yeah, it is. It's
definitely Ted.
It definitely is Ted, fuck. And so then they got in contact with the FBI, and they went and knocked on Ted's door and
found him highly disheveled.
Yeah, like literally everyone was like, he was caked in mud, had not showered in weeks, maybe months. Yeah. In very poor hygiene and mental state.
Did not look good. When you see the photo of him at university compared to the photo of him coming out of the cabin or being his mugshot, it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, and that's like the first photo we put out on Instagram is for part 1 is the one of him at university. Yeah. Looking bright-eyed and fresh.
So normal.
Then we put out the one when he got arrested, and it was like...
looking like a man who lives isolated alone in the woods and sends bombs to people.
Well, and looking like your average homeless person, basically.
Yeah. And
that's kind of... I think David had remarked at one point, and he was like, he looked like a homeless person that you like see on the street, and you got to think like... Are any of those guys like secret geniuses who went to Harvard and like got their PhDs, you know? Like, but he literally did. Like,
that's crazy.
He went from that to this. And then we kind of left off where he got arrested, and I'm going to now take you through the trial and the aftermath and
the manifesto. Is that at the end?
Yeah, I'll leave that for the end. Okay. And that I have now read it in its entirety.
Have you? Good for you for sitting through all that.
Yeah, I would. It was not. It's like an easy read. It's not like hard to read, but it's like
it's a lot.
He rambles.
I know, he fucking goes on and on.
Yeah, like
this could have been said in like a page.
It could have been a lot shorter.
It didn't need to be like 100 pages.
Yeah. So,
but shout out, you spent a lot of time alone. What are you gonna do?
Good for you. At least you. I don't know.
Good for you. I
don't want to give him any credit.
I know. Good for you for actually writing all that, because that's good, I guess.
And he did write it out 5 times.
On the typewriter?
Yeah. Like a fucking psycho.
Well,
anyways.
Yeah.
So, initially, Ted really wanted people to know that he was not crazy. So, he did not want to plead insanity.
Right.
And his defense attorneys knew that he would have to play up his mental illness as much as possible if he wanted to avoid the death penalty.
Oh, the death penalty was on the table.
Okay. So there was like lots of fighting with him, and I kind of think that they initially kind of tried to trick him a little bit.
I can't trick Ted. He's a genius.
Or just a crazy person.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
He and David at the same time was terrified that Ted was going to get the death penalty. Like that was his worst nightmare. He would have
felt so guilty.
Yeah, he would have been really guilty, and also like he knew it would destroy his mother,
right,
who was still alive at the time, and like she was just like, what the hell? Like she had no idea what was going on, and was like this little old lady, and it was, I feel really bad for him in that scenario.
Yeah, she's not the classic serial killer mom that's kind of like, you caused this.
No, not at all. I wouldn't blame her.
No, yeah.
And also, David had heard that when Ted found out that it was David who alerted the authorities to him, that Ted was like super mad, and he decided that his family was basically dead to him.
I mean, hadn't he already cut off his parents? And didn't he already hate Dave because he didn't like Linda?
Well, so that incident happened. I don't know how long that they had been married for, but we knew that he like had put up this big stink and said that he wasn't going to talk to them anymore.
But we don't know if he actually did.
And I think that he like cut them off quite a bit, but he still did have some contact with them. Like David had said, like, Ted had said that he was going to come over at some point and like made plans to, but then said, "Oh, I'm too busy." And David's like,
doing what?
Doing what exactly? But then he
busy's
found out,
a relative term.
Yeah, then he's like, oh, he was making bombs.
Yeah, and like writing diary entries.
Yeah, 40,000 pages.
Did you read that?
Did I read 40,000 pages?
Did you read any of his diary?
No, just like the odd quotes here and there.
Yeah,
I don't know that it exists in
I was
its entirety.
I've never heard of it being out there.
I have never found it.
Okay.
Let me just make sure you have some.
I think it probably is out there, but
probably. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Like the manifesto, really.
There's a lot of you can find a lot of evidence of this case and like a lot of items and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'll get to like why exactly that is. And there's also a lot of photos.
Yeah.
And a lot of interviews. Like there's quite a bit of information about this case. Also, like it was extremely famous.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. It's not like some of
a lot
these
of survivors, right? So.
And like it's his brother also is like very outspoken too, so you get to know a lot about like his actual childhood,
right?
Unlike some of these other cases where we don't.
Do you have any footage of his brother?
Yeah,
I've never seen his brother.
Oh yeah, I'll got you.
Yeah, I want to see that.
That must have been awful for you to have these suspicions that you're going to share with this man who you love.
Yes, but it was really important to talk with Dave about it.
When she said, well, I think maybe your brother's the Unabomber, I thought, well, this is not anything to worry about. Ted's never been violent. I've never seen him violent.
Linda's suspicions kept growing.
They had posted the first few pages of the manifesto on the screen computer in the lobby of the library. So Dave went with me, and then as Dave read the first page, I was sitting at his side and his jaw dropped.
I thought I was going to read the first page of this, turn to Linda and say, "See, I told you so." But on an emotional level, it just sounded like my brother's voice.
So the trial was being held in Sacramento, California.
Okay.
And this site was chosen because it was the city where his first fatal bomb hit. So that's interesting. Before the trial, Ted was examined by a psychiatrist, Sally Johnson, who determined that he was competent to stand trial and to be sentenced to death.
Wow.
But did diagnose him as schizophrenic.
Oh.
And during the trial, the Harvard experiments that Ted was involved in came up, and his defense used it to say that Ted had been super affected mentally by the experiments. And they played some of the tapes and the conversations that were held during the experiments, which were like uncomfortable to listen to, but not like crazy.
And they had those tapes.
Yes, but most of the information about the study was unavailable or redacted.
Okay, because that's what I'd be interested in seeing.
And that's the whole thing. Like there was some tapes, and I've heard some of them. Some of them are in the documentary, The Unabomber in His Own Words, the one that I've been listening to. But it was somewhere like somebody was like being pretty mean, but it wasn't like horrific.
Okay.
And so everyone's kind of speculating that the stuff that's redacted or the stuff that's hidden is like way worse.
Yeah.
So it's still like it talks about them, and that's probably where the public heard about this whole thing.
Right.
But it's still like nothing definitive. It's not like this was an MK Ultra study.
I
like
know.
Nothing like that.
I just want to know.
So, but people like definitely his like David thinks that it was like very bad and had a big effect on him. But Ted to this day
Says
still
it
is like
doesn't,
it wasn't that bad. Like what the hell? So Ted's lawyers actually, and they were able to take his whole cabin and bring it to Sacramento, where the trial was going to be held.
I've seen a photo of the cabin just like in a room.
Yeah, and it's actually I'll tell you where it is.
Like, I guess it just didn't like
they emptied
it. They could just uproot it.
Yeah, they just like I don't know if it was like helicopter, like they craned it. I think they probably used a crane and then put it on.
It didn't like fall apart. I guess it was well constructed. They just like
just the shell of it. I mean, I don't know if it made it like in perfect condition.
Yeah,
but it still exists to this day.
That's kind of cool.
I'll tell you where.
Okay.
But before any of the actual evidence was to be presented at trial, Ted halted things and demanded to represent himself.
Of course he did.
Which, shocking. He was very unhappy with how he was being portrayed because he felt that if people thought that he was crazy, it would undermine his whole life's work, and that just wasn't worth it to him. He'd rather get the death penalty than have people think that he was crazy.
And that's crazy.
Yes, I think that does somewhat prove his insanity.
But I think the definition of insanity comes into play because it's like he does seem legally competent to stand trial, but yet he does seem out of his mind, if that makes sense. Like, he's not somebody who's like a Greyhound bus killer who's just like in a psychotic rage.
Well, yeah, and I think the interesting part was that his lawyers knew that he couldn't plead like actual insanity.
Yes.
Because they knew that he was competent enough to stand trial, and he could easily make himself seem competent.
Yeah.
But in order to avoid the sentence of death, they wanted to make him seem like he had like mental health issues.
Which he does.
Yes. And he, wouldn't have that. He didn't want that because he didn't want anything undermining. Like, he wanted people to think that he was just a
like
genius.
Totally like just together,
like, not even eccentric genius,
just super normal, living in the woods by himself, mailing bombs,
but a genius.
I mean, he's a genius, sure. Like, I don't think we could take that away from him.
He has a high IQ. I'll give him that.
Which is the definition of a genius.
Fair. I mean, I'm no genius, so I don't know that.
But no, but like I think he, like obviously was like highly intelligent. He just had like there's like a thing of like I don't know what IQ even really refers to, like specifically like I guess logical intelligence, but I think he had pretty low like social intelligence and other.
You think he had high social intelligence?
No, low social intelligence. Like there's different levels of intelligence, and he was a genius in some senses.
Yeah.
But not in all.
IQ, what is IQ?
Intelligence quotient or something like that. Pause while we Google. What is IQ? Mensa International.
IQ is a type of standard score that indicates how far above or how far below his/her peer group an individual stands in mental ability. Okay. Yeah,
it's one of those things where, I mean, I've taken an IQ test before. Shout out Scientology. We took an IQ test at the Scientology.
Yeah, at the Scientology building. That's the only place I've ever had my IQ tested.
I've taken one before that, but yeah, that was...
And they gave me a pretty high IQ, but I could tell it was fake because they were like, I can see that you're really smart, but like you're doing all these things wrong. We can help you since you're so smart.
Yeah, that's what they said to me too.
And so I'm like, oh, it's not real.
Yeah, they're not going to tell you you're stupid. That was fun. That was quite the experience.
Yeah, it was.
But
maybe we'll have a story time about that someday. But yeah, anyway, so that's what was going on. And that was like the big struggle and the big, kerfuffle at the trial.
So did he actually succeed in representing himself?
No, the judge at that
Good call,
point,
man.
And part of it was that it was too late. Like they were too far into the process, and so they made him stick with his lawyers. And so the night that they were like, "You have to keep your lawyers," he tried to commit suicide.
Wow,
but was unsuccessful.
Was he like almost successful, or just like he thought he was going to do it and didn't? Do you know?
No, he attempted something. I don't even know how.
I'd be interested to know.
But he did.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah, it's like a common thing. But you could tell he was genuine in the fact that he did not want people thinking he was crazy. Like he had worked for 17 years doing all this bullshit
Yeah.
because he wanted people to think that he was a genius. Not because he wanted people to think he was a genius, because he really believed in what he was saying, but
He wanted
also
to have his legacy be.
and I do think that his entire identity, like all through school, was just that he was like a genius, right? That's what everybody said about him.
Right.
So to have that undermined was like a really big deal for him.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, because of this whole situation, Ted did end up accepting a plea deal.
Okay.
Ted pled guilty to 3 counts of murder in exchange for 8 consecutive life sentences in prison without the possibility of parole. No death penalty.
And he didn't, I assume he obviously, it's like he wanted to commit suicide, but he didn't want the death penalty.
Well, he wanted to commit suicide because he was going to be labeled like insane or like
Right.
mentally ill. But by accepting this plea deal, then he wouldn't have to go through the trial. So none of that would be taken, like no one would talk about it.
Got it.
Right?
Got it. So he didn't want to die necessarily.
No, but he wanted, he
would rather die than be like
labeled
remembered.
insane.
Yeah, remembered as a crazy man.
Because he wanted to go down as like the writer of this amazing manifesto.
It's amazing. It's
not.
super good.
People fucking love it.
Yeah, the first page is good. I like the first page.
The
Didn't read
judge,
further than that though.
the judge also awarded the families of the victims $15 million in restitution.
From who? Who gets that money? Or where's that money from?
I guess that money comes, like, it's supposed to come from, where does restitution come from?
Yeah, because I don't think Ted's got $17 million in his cabin.
But part of it came from,
Pause while we Google again.
restitution is the money that the court orders an offender to pay the victim. So it's probably what it is they will never get any money.
Yeah, Ted
It's one of
doesn't
those
have a fucking
things
cent.
where, yeah, they award it and it's like, okay, well, he has no money. Sorry.
17 million? Like
15
This
million.
isn't fucking Barry and Honey Sherman. Like, who has that money?
Yeah, so it's kind of just like putting a money value on something and saying like, this is what you deserve, but like,
You're just not
Sorry.
gonna get it. Okay.
But after the trial, the judge actually began auctioning off all of Ted's things from the cabin to contribute.
Okay.
And he made it
As
made,
like murderbelia.
yeah, essentially. And it made somewhere between like $200,000 and $300,000.
Would you buy a Ted Kaczynski artifact?
Maybe if I knew the money was going to the victim's family, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know.
A diary entry. Like, what do you get?
Yeah, like I don't.
XOXO Ted.
There's nothing of his stuff that I would like want to put on my wall or like.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably not. And plus, it would all be probably pretty dirty.
Yeah, it'd be gross.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. That's pretty smart by the judge, though.
Yeah, and Ted tried to, and there was, so, and a lot
He
of
was
his,
probably pissed.
he was pissed about it. And a lot of his like journal entries and stuff, they like would redact things or whatever for whatever reason. And he tried to appeal it, saying that it was against his First Amendment rights.
Stop
And they were like, no.
Once
to
you
jail.
murder people, like, we just don't take your opinion. Like, no.
He is currently housed in Florence, Colorado, in a huge maximum security prison, which is actually a supermax prison, which is the most secure prison type that they have. Supermax prisons have the most secure segregated units for prisoners deemed to be the highest risk.
Is he in those units?
Yes. And during his time there, Ted has been a model inmate.
Has he been?
He obviously misses the mountains and the woods and like the outdoors.
Yeah.
But of all the other inmates, Ted is very well suited for life in prison.
Because the isolation is just
Yes.
like his life.
And like living in a little cell. Like,
Yeah.
That's pretty much what he was living in.
So is that, I don't know if you're going to say this, but the latest update on him?
I'll go to
Okay,
that.
okay.
So, but during Ted's tenure in prison, he's met and spoken with many people. He corresponds with a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people, like
I heard if you write to him, he'll respond to you.
probably less so now, but like in his heyday.
Even recently.
Really?
Because that's how
Yeah,
we
yeah,
know
this
about
information
where
gets
he's
let out.
currently at. Yeah. Stay tuned.
But yeah, including somebody for the Netflix documentary that I've been talking
Right.
about. And there's an interview that I'll show you now, and like he's very candid. He doesn't really seem
Let's
crazy
see
at
it.
all.
I don't think he's crazy. Like, I don't think he's out of his mind. I think he's just like he kind of reminds me of somebody with like an antisocial personality in a way.
Yeah.
Like he's very intelligent. He's with it. He's smart, but he just like, got separated from his parents at 9 months old and doesn't have an attachment you know?
Yeah, and he does seem like the type of person like where it spiraled, you know?
Yeah.
Like he was like a fine person, like didn't really have very good social skills.
He
but,
wasn't like a Charles Manson, like criminal from day one kind of, yeah.
No. Okay, here, I'll show you some interview.
What do you regret most in retrospect about your relationship with David, about the way the relationship devolved, I guess?
Well, I'd say basically that I didn't break off with him 20 years earlier.
So you still feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of satisfaction out of corresponding with him. I mean, it was a good relation. It was in many respects, not in all respects, but in many respects, a positive relationship from my point of view.
Right.
But I don't think it was from my brother's point of view. And in the end, it turned out to be disastrous from my point of view, as you can see.
Right. What do you think would have changed in his life if you had broken off earlier?
Well, I mean, let me put it this way. I think that his sense of rivalry with Big Brother, his attempt to equal Big Brother and to win Big Brother's approval with very limited success, I think all this was very hard on him. I think that his self-esteem would have been in much better shape if he hadn't had me to compete with or compare himself with. And I think he would have, and he always had an easy time making friends. He would have had close relationships with other people, so he didn't really need that relationship with me.
Right. If the roles had been reversed, if you had suspected David of being the Unabomber, right? After all the years that you haven't been communicating very regularly, what would you have done?
I would have kept it to myself.
Is that what you feel he should have done?
Yeah.
And what was your reaction to that when you first hear that David is involved in turning you in? What does that feel like?
Well, obviously I resented it. There was another strain to my feelings there. I don't know if I can explain it properly, but in a way I was almost glad because my own brother turning me in a sense made me look good.
That's pretty much it.
It's pretty obvious, like, he doesn't have a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, and also he's got he's very self-centered.
Yes, that's what I mean. He doesn't realize, like, hey, the way that you're portraying yourself is not how you come across at all.
Yeah. And, like, I think that it's, like, when he says that he wouldn't turn his brother in, like, I think that's genuine, but it also shows, like, oh, because you don't care about the welfare of other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, like, that's the thing with David. Like, David has empathy for people in general, so that's why he turned you in, but you don't have that.
Right.
So it's, like...
It comes across in the way he speaks.
Yeah.
Like, the way a lot of sociopaths are. Like, they clearly are saying things that are so selfish and there's so much lack of awareness for their impact on other people.
But it's so, like, matter of fact.
And matter of fact, and it's like, you're clearly very intelligent the way you speak. You're not an idiot, obviously. You're smart. But you just you seem to be missing a link here.
Yes, like, just a key piece of the human puzzle.
Yes.
So, yeah, like, he's done lots of interviews, and you can find a lot of stuff.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, you can find a lot of it on YouTube.
It's so interesting to hear the perspective.
Yeah, and he, like, talks a lot, likes talking, so...
I mean, we know that.
It's there.
It does put a different perspective. Like, I think if people heard those interviews, it would make them feel differently about him. Because he cannot, like, he clearly is kind of callous and, like, doesn't really give a fuck about others.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just, like, don't really take in the circumstances and, like, weren't there to see the, like, real carnage that happened.
Right.
And it's, like, it's very easy to, like, be online and be like, I stand for Kaczynski and, like, whatever. And
because it's like, oh, a few people died, but, like, you don't realize it's like, well, many more people were injured and hurt. And, like, obviously still, like, people dying is every death is significant, but on paper, he doesn't seem like John Wayne Gacy, like somebody who's murdered so many people.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just, it's like, it's very easy to, like, think he's really cool if you don't really think about it that hard.
Yeah. And if you just don't know the details.
Yeah. And especially if you're like a teenager.
And you just read the manifesto and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like
the first page.
And I bet most people have not read it.
We read the first page, Madison, and then it gets like, it's a bit much after that.
It is a bit much. Yeah. So since his identity has become known, like pretty much since they started even putting out his manifesto before he was even charged, Ted Kaczynski has become famous and infamous and kind of a hero to a lot of people.
Yes.
He's been quite a polarizing figure. He's been referenced constantly in pop culture. For example, SNL did numerous sketches about him where Will Ferrell played him. They're not that funny, but like they're kind of funny.
That is kind of funny, and also like the true crime ethic debaters of today would not be happy about that.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know. I think it's I don't know. Personally, I think there
obviously
should be like no censorship on comedy. Like
yeah, I agree. Like whatever. I think it's funny, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, no. And it was like a while ago.
It wasn't
when
in 2020,
Ferrell,
guys.
Yeah, it was when Will Ferrell was
like,
on SNL. So I don't
That's
know.
funny though. I guess it's pop culture. Like,
Yeah, and it's about what I'll talk about.
Okay.
I watched one of the sketches. There was actually a couple of them. So in 2012, Harvard held its 50th reunion for its undergrad class of 1962,
Okay.
of which Ted was a part of.
Okay.
And obviously he couldn't make it because he was in prison.
Right.
But he sent an update, which was actually published in the alumni book.
Guys.
Which I don't really know what an alumni book is because I didn't go to Harvard or anywhere that had a reunion. But I guess it's like a book that shows like what every alum is up to.
Yes.
And so they published it. And so Ted listed his occupation as prisoner. And under awards, he put, quote, 8 life sentences issued by the United States District Court of the Eastern District of California in 1998, end quote.
So he does have a sense of humor.
He does. He clearly does.
That's funny.
And the Harvard Alumni Association.
And they published it?
They published it. And people were pissed.
Yeah.
So the Harvard Alumni Association later issued an apology saying, quote, "We regret publishing Kaczynski's references to his convictions and apologize for any distress that it may have caused others," end quote.
Okay.
But that's the SNL sketch that I watched was like him coming to the reunion.
That's
and, like,
really
in,
funny.
Shackles. And everyone's like, "Oh, like, what are you up to?" And he's like, "Oh, you know, like," and then he's like talking and like making all these jokes about that like sound normal, but it's like really referencing him sending bombs. And then he like gives everybody a package and was like, "Just don't open it till I leave."
That's pretty funny.
It was pretty funny.
That's
but
pretty hilarious if you ask me. Depending on how many
ridiculous.
joints in you are.
Yeah. And since his imprisonment, his manifesto has been turned into a book, which can be purchased on Amazon and any
I'm
other.
surprised they allow that.
Yeah,
Do the
well,
proceeds go to him?
I don't think so because I
Okay.
think that's illegal.
That's what I would have thought.
That's
Yeah.
where the line is drawn.
Yes.
But you can buy it. Like I checked, you can buy it on Indigo.
That's
you can
shocking.
you can also just find like I found
Oh
it.
yeah, you can just
somewhere
Google
else.
it. It's online.
I didn't pay for it.
Just search Unabomber Manifesto PDF.
Yeah, I'll put a link to it in my newsletter
if you guys want to read it. Yeah.
But since then, also like countless documentary series, movies, podcasts, just like this one discussing the story, have been made. Like he's been
so well known.
He's a household name, and
Yes,
partially because I
yes,
think
definitely.
like people who went through that whole thing and like saw the news and stuff, like they're still alive. Like it's like very recent history, and it was huge
and a unique case in a sense, I would say.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
It's not. I mean, everybody knows. I feel like most quote unquote serial killers, a lot of them are household names, but also it's like in a way his crimes are easy to detach from, because it's not like he's like, you know, murdering somebody and then living with the body and then hiding in his basement. Like it's more depersonal.
Yeah, his murders were not personal.
Yeah.
So I
feel like it's easier to like have kids talk about that, or like more people know about it. It's less like, oh, I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah,
you know?
I would kind of compare them more to like the DC Sniper.
Oh, I actually
the DC
don't
Sniper
know.
guys.
I think I know who that is.
Oh, that's a very popular one. Maybe I'll do it if people are interested. People have requested it. But it was like these two guys who went around sniping, and nobody knew who it was. Just like random people would just get shot at like a gas station or
that's
whatever. And you know, it was very similar. It was these two guys. One of them had like basically was like a terrorist and had like I don't know the exact details. I'd have to look into it.
That's so scary.
And the other guy was just like some like younger guy who he just kind of strung
accomplice
along.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. But it was very similar. Like it was an ideological murderer who just went around killing random people for like the scene of it all. You know?
That's fucked up.
Yeah, and if you hit up Reddit, you can find a lot of discussions of people talking about the manifesto. People who are like, I read the manifesto, like I don't disagree with anything. Why am I wrong? And then people will be like, well, because this, whatever.
I should read that.
It's very interesting. It's an interesting and lively debate over there.
I love a Reddit debate.
A lot of it's kind of useless, but you can find some good stuff in there.
And that is the essence of Reddit.
Yeah. It's Reddit.
Yes.
In December of 2021, Ted was actually transferred out of the Supermax prison and into the Federal Medical Center in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And authorities hadn't said why, but according to a woman who was corresponding with him,
who published her letter on Reddit, by the way.
Yeah.
I read it on there.
He said that he had terminal cancer, and that's why he went to the hospital. And he should be about 80 by now.
Yeah. He's
so
up there.
He's an old guy now.
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski and his Unabomber ways have inspired a lot of artistic work in pop culture, as I was saying. His manifesto has been quoted a lot in books, and many people still argue about the ethics of like sharing his work.
Yeah.
It's very clear that he's also been the inspiration for some very radical and extremist groups or people. And that's
not a good,
Well, that's like why it's like, ooh, it's kind of sketchy. He's often referred to by various eco-fascist groups online. And one of the worst was a man named Anders Behring Breivik.
Good job with that.
I'm probably absolutely butchering that, but
I have a feeling he doesn't really deserve to have his name pronounced properly anyway.
I mean, it's probably debatable whether or not I should even be saying his name, but he executed 2 attacks in Norway in 2011, and it was like the biggest attack I've probably ever even heard of.
That's really sad.
By a single person. Just a little Reader's Digest on it. The first, it was all in one day. I actually watched a movie about this that showed the whole thing, and it was horrifying. So in one day, he first set off a car bomb that went off and killed 8 people.
Wow.
And so then like all the police got distracted and went there. And while that was happening, he went and I looked up what the actual island and the places are called, but there's no way I could pronounce them.
Yeah, that's fine.
So he went to this island where that housed a youth summer camp that was put on by the Norwegian Labour Party. Anders dressed as a police officer in order to gain entry, and then he opened fire on the campers. And I saw different estimates, but he killed either 67 or 77 and injured 32.
So sad.
Children.
Yeah.
Like these were like teenagers and younger.
Yeah.
It was horrific.
Yes.
I have not, like 77 children he murdered.
That's insane.
And Anders published his own manifesto, which copied large portions of Ted's.
Such a douchebag.
And he had like it was different. Like when Ted described leftists, he had them as like cultural Marxists. Like he changed little words, but like used the exact same sentences and stuff. So it's very clear that
he just plagiarized Ted's manifesto.
Yeah, he straight up plagiarized.
Well, I mean, yeah.
We also now know that Ted studied the work of Jacques Ellul, who was a French philosopher and sociologist and a professor. But he took Jacques' work way further. Jacques was a professor of history and sociology of institutions on the Faculty of Law and Economic Sciences at the University of Bordeaux.
Okay.
And he was like a writer. He wrote lots of books and articles over his lifetime and stuff. But the dominant theme of Ellul's work proved to be the threat to human freedom and religion created by modern technology. So you
sounds
really
familiar.
Yeah, you really see this.
Okay.
And the main difference was like Ted was an atheist and this guy was very religious, and he thought that technology was like a big threat to religion as well.
Right.
Whereas Ted kind of took it more as just like freedom in general, I guess.
And humanity.
Yes.
I think it's a super interesting thing to philosophize about.
For sure. It's a very interesting, like Ted's.
It's a very valid topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like interesting to debate about, interesting to like talk about. I just don't think it was like that this is right. It's like, it's very, very debatable.
No. Like, just publish your manifesto and like be a professor.
Yeah. So, and which he very well could have done.
Yeah.
But he just didn't feel that that was like enough.
Fair.
So I read the manifesto.
Okay.
Here she is. It is,
for podcast listeners, it is a big stack of papers printed out.
It's
Shout out
about
printers.
34 pages, including the references, but it's like
tiny print.
Yeah, so I don't know how many pages of like a book that would be, but it's called Industrial Society and Its Future. Yeah. And it's written as if he is like a group. Like he always says like, we this and we think this, we think that, but it's just him. So I'll give you a little rundown of the manifesto.
Let's hear it.
So he starts with a long rant about leftists creeping towards totalitarianism. He hates leftists. Hates them. He says that leftists want to force the entire society to adhere to their own version of morality, which evolves constantly, because as every cause they fight for example, gay rights or women's rights, is eventually won, they need to keep going and fighting for more niche minority groups, and it like never ends. He believes that leftists still work to uphold the current industrialist system, and by their nature, they need the system in order to achieve their goals of collectivism. So like he thinks that they could never like be rid of technology because they need it in order to like provide for the lowest common denominator or whatever. Like, so they will always rely on what he wants to destroy. Okay. And he admits that leftists are difficult to define, but here he does his best. And I will quote what he describes as a leftist, because it's like it's kind of a big part. Quote, "The leftist is oriented toward large-scale collectivism. He emphasizes the duty of the individual to serve society and the duty of society to take care of the individual. He has a negative attitude toward individualism. He often takes a moralistic tone. He tends to be for gun control, for sex education, and for psychologically enlightened educational methods for social planning, for affirmative action, for multiculturalism. He tends to identify with victims. He tends to be against competition and against violence, but he often finds excuses for those leftists who do commit violence. He is fond of using the common catchphrases of the left like racism, sexism, homophobia, capitalism, imperialism, neocolonialism, genocide, social change, social justice, social responsibility. Maybe the best diagnostic trait of the leftist is his tendency to sympathize with the following movements: feminism, gay rights, ethnic rights, disability rights, animal rights, political correctness. Anyone who strongly sympathizes with all of these movements is almost certainly a leftist." End quote. Although he hates leftists, he's clearly also not like a right-winger either. His ideology is more of like an eco-anarchist, and he explicitly suggests keeping out of the political realm entirely, because he really just wants to like destroy the system. And he feels like he talked about in one part about how like using the political system would only like halt the goal, because then they would gain power and then things would get so shitty that they would just get voted out. He was like, if a Green Party ever won and like did what I wanted them to do, it would just like show everybody how horrible it is, and they would not be
the
like,
system itself is flawed, essentially.
Exactly. Kaczynski's main argument is that technology has evolved to a level so high that it has taken over our individual freedoms. He believes that technology has robbed people of what he calls the power process. The power process consists of 4 levels. So first, a goal; 2, effort towards that goal; 3, attainment of that goal; and 4, autonomy in pursuit of that goal. So he thinks technology has robbed people of going through this process. And he believes that people need to go through this process in order to have meaning in their lives, and in order to meet their like biological needs, in order to feel fulfilled. Here he says, quote, "Today people live more by virtue of what the system does for them or to them than by virtue of what they do for themselves. And what they do for themselves is often more and more along channels laid down by the system. Opportunities tend to be for those that the system provides. The opportunities must be exploited in accord with the rules and regulations, and techniques prescribed by experts must be followed if there is to be a chance for success," end quote. So essentially that like autonomy is taken out of people's lives.
Right.
He says that the current industrialist society only generally allows for people to pursue surrogate activities like hobbies and stuff, which are artificial goals, as they are not for the purpose of fulfilling actual biological goals like finding food, having sex, and like shelter, whatever. So he says basically, since we have our biological needs met so easily, we lack real freedom and fulfillment. Kaczynski asserts that many technological advances appear to make us more free, for example, cars or the internet. But as each advancement is accepted by society as a whole, and as all these things are piled on top of each other, we actually lose our freedom in a larger sense. And by freedom, he means our like individual freedom. Because, for example, we have to adhere to like traffic lights, even as pedestrians. Also, there's like licenses and insurance and all this stuff that we have to go through in order to like have these individual like pieces of technology. And because we're like tracked when we're using the internet. Also, the more advanced we become, the more we rely on others in higher positions of power for things like our security, and it just gets put into hands like that are like further and further down the line. So like we are basically like we have no actual freedom to decide these things for ourselves. He talks a lot about genetic engineering and fears that although scientists started by altering genes to cure or prevent diseases, it will inevitably soon lead to the elite using this technology for, I guess, like eugenic purposes and altering future generations of people.
He goes down a lot of paths in this one.
Yes. He also sees a future where computers take over everything and we rely on them to the point where they take over and we can no longer understand them.
We know. The robot uprising is coming. Like,
that's
gonna happen.
He definitely thinks that.
It could, like, yeah.
Yeah, and I
mean, yeah.
all of these things I think are like...
He makes valid points.
Well, it's... All these observations are true, but I think what he leaves out is... Or what people don't think about when they are saying like, oh yeah, like I totally agree with that. Like I think a lot of people... He talks about losing freedom, and that's true. But freedom is, you don't just get freedom. Freedom comes with responsibility. So to live in his world, you have to take on the responsibility for your own healthcare.
Yeah, like
and for your and for like finding your own food. There's like what he wants is to destroy everything. And he has no plan for what to do in place of that. So if you're somebody who's born like missing a leg or like with a disease that requires you going to the hospital, you're just fucked in his world. Yeah. So I think it's like his observations are correct. All these things like there's
validity to what he says. Like it's not like there's definitely points that make sense, but it's also just kind of like
it's what you do
misguided.
About it.
Yeah.
And like some people all these things are a trade-off, right? Like you trade off like losing some of your freedom for the ability to use a car and be able to drive wherever you want to go. Right. So some people are like, that's a worthy trade-off. Yeah. And even like, you know, it's up for everybody to decide whether or not that's a worthy trade-off. And I think that like life, we should have a society where like, if you do want to go live like a hermit and not be involved in society, I think people should be able to do that. And I think one of his gripes is like, he tried to do that and like found it literally impossible.
Right.
So fair enough. I think that's a fair point. But to destroy the entire system so that everybody is forced to live like that is...
Well, you know, he's not really thinking about other people necessarily. Like, he's got a very individualistic point of view.
And in some ways, he is, though, because he genuinely thinks that it would be good for people.
Yeah, because he lacks empathy and understanding of...
Yes. So, like, in his mind, he is thinking of other people, but...
Yeah, exactly. But he's not. But, yeah, it's like, it's just so funny because, like, this was written quite a while ago, and I feel like a lot of the things stand true, and it's like technology has evolved so much further, and it's just so like it's not funny, but it's like, I mean, yeah, we probably are gonna have to face the robot uprising at a certain point. Like it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think his observations are like pretty spot on. But it's his like we all observe that. Cool. But it's where he wants to take it that it's like okay.
And we don't read that part. We only read the first few pages and then lose interest. So
exactly.
Like,
everyone's
cool.
like, oh my God, it's so true. Like, he's totally right. And it's like, yeah, like he has eyes. Like you can see, if you think about this for 3 seconds, it's true.
Mind. Yeah.
But he wants to just destroy your life.
Yeah.
There's things about your life that you like. He also says, and this is another interesting thing that this is a good observation. He says that mood-altering drugs are overprescribed to people to help them live in a depressing world that he had just described. And since we're able to create the drugs to help people adapt to the system, it just continues evolving. So like we're creating a situation where it is depressing for people, and so we're giving them drugs to help them adapt to this depressing situation so that we can make it more depressing.
Yeah.
And like,
you know what's interesting? Or I don't know if it's interesting, but to me, this is kind of how I felt leaving university. Like, I feel like the university education system really puts a lot of this stuff in your head because you really get to see the failures of the system because they can't help but teach you all the shit that, like, goes wrong. Even though they're like, this is really good, but here's all the things that, like, are kind of, like, blatantly obviously going wrong, like how much higher the rates of mental illness are and how much money the pharmaceutical companies are making off of it. And that's like, well, like, it is, when I graduated, I had a really, really cynical perspective on, like, technology and the system and everything because I had just spent 4 years learning about this exact stuff, and I was like, this world is shitty. Like, this world is trash.
And it's like they set you up so badly because, like, I don't know, for our generation, and like maybe you had a different experience. I know, like, your parents were immigrants and, like, you like maybe a different experience than me, but, like, from the time that I was a child, like, our parents were really into, like, give them self-esteem, like, tell them they can do anything. So, like, my whole life I was like, you can do anything. Like, you're so great. You're so good at everything. Like, the world will just, like, fall before your feet. And then you get to university and they're like, the world is fucked. Look at all this fucked up shit. Like, it's an awful place. And then you're like, oh, what? I thought things were good. And so, like, it sets you up to just, like, be like, boom, you're fucked.
Wow,
and, like, also at university, like, you know, I took, like, women and gender studies classes and whatever. And it was like, you're a victim for this reason and this reason and this reason. And they're oppressing you this way. And this is, like,
that's
why you're a victim. And it's, like, it's so easy to just be like, oh, you're so right. Like, so many things are going so wrong for me. And it's like, no, you're a fucking university student at U of T. Like, you're like thrown in all these different directions, told you're so great, and then you're a victim, and then this happens, and this is so unfair, and it just, like, it really fucks with you.
Yeah.
And I think
he
that
probably
like,
had that too. Ted, you're a genius. Ted, you're amazing. And he's like, holy shit, this world is fucked.
Yeah, and then he was sent to these Harvard experiments, and he has, like, no social skills, so, like, he's, you know, it's hard to, like, see the benefits of your successes. Well, you know, it just really, it's easy to be caught up in this, like, ping pong of, like,
and guaranteed a lot of the people reading the manifesto and liking it are people like me who are, like,
they're in the same position.
Like, for me personally, it was like immigrant parents, like, you have to go to university. That's all they saved up their whole life to send me to university. And I go and I'm like, oh, well, this is awful.
Yeah.
No offense to anybody who liked university, but
no, and university, like, there's really
pros and cons,
great aspects to it. Like, and if you, like, are
I'm so down on it,
I feel like if I went to university now as, like, a, like, fully realized person with, like, more life experience and stuff, it would be way more, like, manageable mentally, you know? You'd way more be able to, like, to put things in actual context, and, like, after you've, like, had a real job and, like, understand how you pay your taxes and, like,
that's
lived
the whole point
as
of
an
university,
adult,
though, is to
prepare you for that. But it's gotten so, like, dark, you know?
It's dark as hell, man.
And it's gotten really, like, activism-y.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of just, like, you know, it, like, pits people against each other, and it, like, it makes things way weirder.
It's almost like,
the
leftists are just, like, distracting us with these causes so they can do their leftist thing.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he went to Harvard, so, like, it's extremely leftist, like, so I'm sure he met a bunch of people there, decided he didn't like them, and, like, then plugged them into this manifesto, and was like, they see the, and, like, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely...
He doesn't like leftists at all. He goes on a lot.
I think there's a lot of relatable aspects to it. So, and that I feel like is the essence of Ted, is, like, he's kind of relatable, but then it's like, no.
Well, and it's like he, like, really believed in something, and he's a smart person, so he was able to, like, portray his ideology in a way that a lot of people kind of buy it into. Yeah. And I'm going to keep going. Because so, as I just said, like, I was talking about the drugs that were, like, he's saying they're overprescribed to people, blah, blah, blah. So I'll read this quote here. Quote, imagine a society that subjects people to conditions that make them terribly unhappy, then gives them drugs to take away their unhappiness. Science fiction? It is already happening to some extent in our own society. It is well known that the rate of clinical depression has been greatly increasing in recent decades. We believe that that is due to disruption in our power process, as explained in paragraphs 59 to 76. We talked about the power process. But even if we are wrong, the increasing rate of depression is certainly the result of some conditions that exist in today's society. Instead of removing the conditions that make people depressed, modern society gives them the antidepressant drugs. In effect, antidepressants are a means of modifying an individual's internal state in such a way as to enable him to tolerate social conditions that he would otherwise find intolerable. Yes, we know that depression is often of purely genetic origin. We are referring to those cases in which environment plays the predominant role, end quote. Ted admits that with all this technology, we're able to live longer and more healthy lives, but he says that people who are able to endure the power process to meet their biological needs have less of a desire for longevity. Okay. Because Ted Kaczynski thinks that primitive society is more desirable than modern society, he believes that we must destroy our society as it is and start over. He literally wants to burn it down by whatever means necessary so that we are forced back into living without technology. He does not have a plan for how exactly things should be after that. He believes taking these ideas through the political process is doomed to fail. So he suggests getting a very loud and committed minority of people, not leftists, to, I guess, just cause so much stress on the system that it implodes. Okay. He thinks leftists would take this movement and shift things towards their own goals, which require modern technology. Ted says that if he had merely published his manifesto as a normal academic, no one would have listened, and he had to cause terror and destruction, and yes, even kill people to get his message across and for people to pay attention.
Again, there's some validity to that, but the morality is just like, no.
Well, yeah, I don't think he's wrong about that.
It's valid. Yeah, of course we're going to pay attention.
But it's like, yeah, because
that's bad. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like where my notes end. Like that is what it is. And that's like a very Reader's Digest of his manifesto.
Well, thank you, because I don't want to read the whole thing.
Yeah,
so.
It's quite long, but it's basically just goes off about those type of things. Yeah. And as we were saying, like, I do think his observations are basically correct. Yeah. And he makes some like interesting points. Definitely. And it's interesting to think about things in that way. But where I think most people think about it on a very surface level and just don't think about like what the actual consequences of that are. Right. You know, I think the biggest thing is that you don't, and a lot of people miss this. Freedom is not just freedom. Like, America is like the freest society in the world, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. When you have all this freedom, it's not just like you get to do whatever you want. If you have freedom from the government entirely, then you need to figure out what you do when somebody needs to go to the hospital, right, or when a building catches on fire, or, you know, when things are just not organized properly, or like, you know, as a woman, would you want to be living in a society where there was like no police and like there was no people to go to if you get like raped or robbed or right, somebody gets murdered? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. Me neither. But it's just like, those are some of the things you have to consider when reading this work.
I just think everything has pros and cons. Like, I don't know that there is a perfect solution.
Well, life is a series of trade-offs, right? Yeah. So it's what trade-off is worth it to you and when it's not. Yeah. To him, he went to live in the woods all by himself and like mind his own business.
So for him, it was pretty obvious.
Yeah, and he like doesn't have a desire to like have like relationships with people and like, you know, do a lot of things that like normal people desire to do. Although he thinks that that is like, that people don't actually desire these things, right, or like that they have a more,
it's a surrogate,
you know. And I also don't think that's wrong either. I think that in a way that's definitely true, but how, like, what do we have to do in order to achieve that? Yeah, is the question.
And for him, like, I don't think he necessarily was a happy person living the way he was, but I just think he never was able to integrate into society. So he just didn't, like, he logically understands a lot of things, but on an emotional level, he doesn't quite get it.
Yeah, he missed out on a lot of like true life experiences. Like, I'm pretty sure he's a virgin. Right. I don't know, unless he like, you know, maybe hired a sex worker at some point or something.
Maybe he did have somebody that he
very possible. Or yeah, he led a very secret life. So unless he's like hidden that he was with a woman or something, but there's no. evidence of that. There's
Right.
that one woman that he briefly dated that, you know, he wrote all those
Weird
limericks
poems,
about.
Yeah. Do we have the poems?
No, you know what? Let me see. I
would
doubt
love
it.
to read Ted Kaczynski's poetry. Yeah, I'm an ex-cult member. I admit of the TED cult.
Oh,
I admit
yeah.
that I read the manifesto, page 1, shortly after graduating university in my most cynical hours.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about.
I don't think I can find I'll look more deeply, and
Okay,
if I can find them,
you
I'll
do,
post them on
please,
Instagram or something.
We need the Ted Kaczynski limericks.
Yeah. Let me see.
Wait, maybe she found them?
No, this is like people writing limericks about him.
Okay. Guys, come on.
Um,
We have better things to do with our time.
But interestingly too, I also David, I think David and Linda, I think are like a really like interesting couple.
Yeah.
I'll maybe post some interviews with them.
I
But
would not
there's,
mind seeing that. Yeah.
Since the whole thing went down, like David reached out to a number of the victims to like apologize.
David.
Because he's just a
David, you're the
fucking
nice guy that like Ted
He's
was
so
not
sweet.
or is not.
And he is actually started going.
Ted's such a dick to him too in the interview. He's like, yeah, this little brother always wanted to live up to me. Like,
And you know, he's like, he
Stop it.
just idolized Big Brother. Like, say your own name.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You know. But he travels around with one of the victims to talk about the death penalty and like to
That's cool.
to speak against the death penalty,
That's cool.
which is kind of an interesting
Yeah, shout out David.
take. And yeah, him and Linda are just like a super cute little couple who just like
Yeah.
mind their own business
Yeah.
and don't murder people.
Yeah. Well, different life paths lead
Yeah.
down different places, but
So yeah, that's the basic story of the Unabomber.
wow.
3 parts. I think
Quite the case.
that was good, and a good 50th episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd be really, really interested to see if we have any Unabomber fans
Yeah, let us know if you are one.
in our audience, and like tell me why I'm wrong. Tell us why
Yeah,
tell us why we should be fans of the Unabomber. Why was he right? Maybe he is. I don't know. I'm not saying I know what is right and what is wrong, but
I just think that there's enough people in the world where you can't pick one thing that's going to be right or wrong for enough of the population. Like there's
Yes.
so many different experiences. It's hard to
yeah,
you know?
and like I would love for him to be able to live off by himself and not be bothered by
Yeah.
people. I would love that for him.
I mean, he's pretty much got that.
Well, remember there was like those motorcyclists, like they
Yeah,
were-
no, I mean right now he's got that in jail. No one's
Yeah,
bothering him.
well,
if he's in segregation.
yeah, it's like it must be like at least partially segregated because he was like loving it.
Yeah. So fucked up. I guess that's good.
So yeah, let us know your thoughts. Please sign up for my newsletter
Yes.
at grimweekly.com. Please see us on Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast, Twitter at Who's Knocking Pod. Email us at hello@whosknockingpodcast.com. We would love to hear from you, thoughts on the Unabomber, etc.
Yep.
Stay safe out there because you never know.
Who's knocking?
This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.